Chapter 61 Early Summer. And listen to Fantasia proudly said, "This is just a small amount of money, and so after earning this first pluck, brother, and then write a 70 or 80 times, which cannot be sold to the sea, have to be carefully proofreading, do a rare printed book, and then all the private auctions, the highest bidder, who want to see the end first, who want to see more girls in the end married to the second master of the treasure did not, you have to be the first to the silver dutifully shelled. Out." Fan Xian twisted his ear and scolded, "Miss Duo and Master Bao Air have no relationship whatsoever. You brats haven't even read the book, and you want to sell it." Fantasia aggrieved, "Yesterday you bought the book on the street, after returning to the house to ask my sister to read it, just read a few dozen words, feels so boring, so stuck. This is bent on drilling in the eye of money." Fan House young master is really very puzzled why those women in Kyoto like crazy like this book chewing tasteless things. "Come on, not going to argue with you about this," Fan Xian said hopelessly. "It's just that these affairs are complicated. You're a small child, and you have to enroll in school. Where do you find the time to do this, or wait for a few years and then say it? A few years from now? The safflower is cold." Fantasia shrieked in shock. "Then what else? You are, after all, a son of the Fan family. If you really throw yourself out to go into business, how can this be hidden from Aunt Lu and father? Beware that they tear your skin." Fantasia said in agonizing pain, "Yes, that's why I decided to borrow a shopkeeper from Qing Yutang, so I'll have to hide behind the curtain myself." Fan Xian was really surprised. In addition to the brash and unreasonable nature of this youngster in front of him, he was actually so talented in this aspect of business that he actually thought of this trick of professional managers, and under the agitation of his heart and mind, he left out the 3 words Qing Yutang intentionally or unintentionally. Seeing the little guy's mind is set, he sighed, took out from his bosom the silver bills accumulated over the years, together with his sister's filial piety to himself, and handed them over, instructing him to take his time, and first discuss with the few Qinggui in the mansion. It's not a matter of keeping those people unused. Fantasia counted them with a smile on his face and realized that his brother was quite rich, plus the ones he had saved. The first startup capital should be almost there. Fan Xian no longer said anything else, but carefully reminded, to go to the top and suppress the good people of the lower class. This kind of maneuver, in addition to relying on the old man's name, you also have to allow others to have some favors before you can do so. What is brother saying? Fantasia said viciously, bribes are naturally to be given, and in the future, if you become a great official, there will always be a day when you can make them spit it back out again. Fan Xian nearly collapsed, hurriedly pushed the door and left. In the past always feel the silver banknotes also have a different fragrance. Today I know that the smell of copper is really nose. The day is just noon, the sunlight is blazing, the trees on both sides of the road are sickly, breathless hanging, cannot give the poor pedestrian some comfort and shade. Fan Xian took a bowl of sour plum soup by the side of the road and sipped it in small bites, knowing that drinking it too quickly wouldn't quench his thirst and that his stomach wouldn't be able to handle it. He listened to the robin noises from the trees next to him and wondered, what month is this? It was only a few months ago, spring hadn't even passed yet, so why was summer coming? The distant Qing temple in the sunlight looks particularly solemn, the original sum of the clean air all dried up, the black eaves reflecting the sun. The picture is very sacred. Today's Qing temple was a bit more lively than yesterday's, and from time to time people went in to worship and pray for blessings. Fan Xian was a bit curious as to why it was so quiet when he went there yesterday. Naturally, he did not know that when that nobleman stole half a day's leisure yesterday, both sides of the road had long since been laid out as a barrier, and the only reason why he was able to walk to the door in a graceful manner and take on that expert was all dependent on someone's secret indulgence. 5 bamboos did indeed indulge him, indulging him in drinking, indulging him in blindly organizing, and even when he wanted to go to the temple to take a look, 5 bamboos was able to even knock out so many guards for such a very small issue. Fan Xian didn't realize how much of a mess he had actually caused yesterday, and was still sitting on the bench drinking sour plum soup with his legs stretched out, waiting for the girl. In a room very close to the Qing temple, the sunlight couldn't penetrate into the room, so it seemed a bit dark and cool. Gong Dian sat coldly on a chair, regulating his internal energy to advance himself into the best state. Last night he was on late duty, but early this morning he didn't return to the house, but came to the Temple of Celebration again. Because he thought about it, he always felt that yesterday that teenager appeared a bit strange. Those little cubs under his own subordinates were knocked out by the sect master level experts at the same time, and that teenager entered the Qing temple. What kind of relationship exists between them? I don't know why. Gong Dian always felt that that teenager would definitely come here again today, and maybe that absolute expert whose appearance he didn't know would also come here. This was an expert's intuition, although it might not necessarily be accurate, but it was worth a bet. But that damned eunuch Hong didn't believe in his judgment at all, and just kept on investigating within the guards, so he had to come alone. Gong Dian quietly sat inside the house, his eyes through the very narrow gap under the window, coldly looking at the door of the Qing temple. Outside, Fan Xian finally couldn't stand the exposure of the sun, and drank the soup in his cup in one gulp, unbuttoned the 2 cloth buttons on his lapel, and stretched out his tongue and walked toward the Qing temple. Fan Xian's footsteps were getting closer and closer to the Qing temple. Gong Dian seemed to hear something and frowned slightly. Under the diffuse sunlight, Fan Xian's feet felt a bit hot even when they landed on the green stone slabs, and he seemed to hate this feeling a bit as he put his feet back. Then he fastened the cloth buttons on his chest, turned around with a smile, and went back to the stall selling sour plum soup and asked for another bowl, then slowly drank it down, and then immediately took a leisurely step away from the Qing temple, and waited until he had gotten into the carriage that was waiting at the street corner before he exhaled and came out, shouting, "Return to the mansion at once." Fuji Zijing glanced at him curiously and realized that the eldest young master's face did not have the slightest expression. Fan Xian sat on the carriage and turned back to lift the back curtain to look in the direction of the Qing temple, frowning, wondering why Uncle Wu Zhu had sent a message for him to leave, and even more so, wondering who was waiting for him there. Gong Dian looked at the front of his face full of coldness, his ears heard that the footsteps were actually going back, his eyes were full of essence, so he was ready to get up, but unexpectedly he felt a cloudy wind blowing behind him, and his neck was cold. In the twilight of spring, the heat of the day was better than the summer heat, but Gong Dian dripped a drop of cold sweat down. His hands rested smoothly on his knees, his fingernails were trimmed appropriately, and the quick sword, simple in style but incredibly sharp, lay 3 inches in front of his hands. However, he didn't dare to draw the knife, because he could sense that the man behind him was stronger and faster than himself.